Hi guys, this is Matthew from Warrior Pilgrim. This video is going to be a bit different from ones I've previously uploaded because I've always wanted to do split screen content doing reviews on certain videos, or in this case just certain chunks of media. And when I was listening to the radio a couple of weeks ago now, as you'll see from the dates on the video, I heard a snippet from a BBC programme known as Any Answers. It's sort of a follow-on from Any Questions, where a panel of people talk about certain subjects that have been brought up in the media, and then people get to share their views about it on Any Answers. This particular one was on the attitude of the Church of England to same-sex marriage. In their case, they believe homosexuality is a sin. They shouldn't allow same-sex marriage, but they can bless the marriage. This has naturally led to people being edgy on both sides, both on the LGBT+ and on the homophobic crowd. To quickly give a summary of my views, I agree homosexuality is a sin, but only when it's being practiced outside of a committed relationship. Same with any sexual sin, it risks spreading STDs, therefore can cause harm to the population if left unchecked. The way to deal with that is to make the relationship binding by law, hence make it a marriage. There's nothing in the Bible that says otherwise, and whilst there's loads of passages talking about how homosexuality is a sin, it doesn't say anything against gay marriage, no matter what people say. You want to see a load of other videos where I express this in detail, I'll leave links in the description down below. And otherwise, I hope you enjoy this video. I will say just quickly, I've had to change the cameras a few times because I tried doing the split screen with the original software and it just ground out. I couldn't do it very well with the software as it was. So I tried separating out with different cameras, and that allowed good sound quality, though I did have to jump between cameras because they couldn't store all the information. Also, I'm recording this after I did all the editing because at that time I was running a very high fever, had a major bout of tonsillitis, and well, I wasn't feeling my best over that week, so that's why it's taken me so long to get this sorted. With that out of the way, I hope you enjoy this sort of video, and if you want to see more like it, let me know in the comments below.
So let's turn to the church and talk to Pastor Lynn in London. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you, sir?
I'm very well. So the Church of England criticised for being out of touch when it comes to gay marriage. What do you say?
Well, my personal view as a Christian is the Bible is very, very strong on its stance on gay marriage, gay relationships. And the Bible actually states, and I quote, it's an abomination to God. So my personal view...
That is actually a reference. Unfortunately, that is actually a reference to homosexual copulation rather than gay marriage or gay relationships. Purely copulation has nothing about the actual bonding in other ways. There's more relationships than just sexual ones.
Is why should we, as Christians, that includes the Church of England, why should we lower the standard set out in the Bible in order to people please?
Well, there's a lot there. You talk about the abomination quote, which I think, if my memory serves me right, comes from Leviticus, does it not?
It does.
But then in the New Testament, we're told that we should judge not and we shall not be judged. So which bit of the Bible do we choose from?
we are not judging, we are simply just making a stand in the same way that we would not, hopefully, go out and kill someone or steal a Mars bar or any other chocolate bar that's available. We make a stand for righteousness. We make a stand for the level that God wants us to live at.
But the point I'm making is that you pick and choose the bits of the Bible that suit your argument.
A lot of people do.
So there is more.
Before we get to that section of cherry picking, the murder section is sort of a snowball effect thing that people claim will happen, and it's completely unfounded in my opinion. Really doesn't make any sense at all. Yes, in theory it could happen, but then again there was a theory that the nuclear explosion will set fire to the atmosphere, and it hasn't done that yet.
Compromise here than you were initially suggesting.
We are to take the Bible as fact from Genesis 1 right the way through to the end of Revelation.
Right, even if it contradicts itself in the process.
Even if it contradicts itself in the process. Now, we know the Bible contradicts itself. We also know that
it doesn't actually. Atheists say that quite a lot, but really, it's complementing itself. And if you bear in mind the context of each particular verse, you'll actually see that in some cases it is not contradicting itself, it's more pointing out things that we do compared to what God will do. That's sort of picking and choosing. To be honest, we do that. That's what I try and do, is channel to express the parts that we shouldn't pick and choose. That, to be fair, I am doing.
The Bible has been rewritten and rewritten and rewritten. And that is not to make it more user-friendly, but it's made so that it's more accessible to people like the youth and younger generation and people.
No, I get that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt at that point.
User-friendly, accessible to youth, that is sort of the same. It's not changing the meaning of the Bible to suit the day and age. It's changing the language of the Bible so we can understand it better. Granted, that does lose aspects in translation compared to the original, but there's only so much you can do when trying to transcribe literature.
I suppose what I'm driving at here, and this is why it was raised in the programme, and clearly if I start having a biblical debate with you, you're probably going to win because you probably know the Bible better than I do. But the point being made now is that here we are in 2023 in a country that now for 10 years has seen gay marriage as being legal, although not canon law, I accept. But that should point the Church of England in a new direction if it wants to stay relevant.
My answer to that is, if it suddenly became law to go out and kill people and to steal things, why should a group of people, i.e. Christians, the Church of England and any other faith that follows Jesus, suddenly turn their backs on a lifelong teaching to follow something that they know is a sin?
Well, I don't think you're necessarily comparing like with like, given that the...
For that one, strange enough, that was explored in the film The Purge. Well, the first Purge, at least. The MC is a horror film about basically what happens when, for one day, law gets removed, everything's legal, you can steal, you can murder, you can do whatever you want, really. Apparently the original purpose was supposedly for catharsis, let people get it out of their system. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. People just occasionally stole a couple of things, but they didn't commit mass murder, whilst the original intention was to actually act as population control. That shows people aren't inherently malicious. There are some people like that, but that doesn't mean a lot. It's not like suddenly everyone's going to go and start murdering people. Murder rates will go up, but that doesn't mean it's going to be legal. In a similar way that abortion rates haven't necessarily risen but safe abortion levels have risen. If you just make abortion illegal, it's going to only lower the legal abortions, but increase the illegal abortions, which are completely unsafe and are more likely to put people.
The reason that gay marriage was legalised 10 years ago was because it went through a parliamentary democratic process, which I'm imagining granting people the right to kill each other probably wouldn't be. But I take your point.
It doesn't mean it went through the Bible process.
Well, that's. I suspect that's a debate for another day, but I appreciate the call. Thank you so much for coming on.
The Bible process? Granted, governments don't necessarily follow the Bible these days, but if you actually study the Bible and see where it's mentioned, you'll see the patterns emerge, allowing it to occur sensibly within a committed relationship. Hence why gay marriage is actually a better solution.
Joining that debate, Henry Marston in Rotherham. Henry, good afternoon.
Hello. I'm looking at the logic of marriage, because it's a pretty well universal thing within human society that there's some kind of arrangement to regularize the relationship between a man and a woman wanting to have children. And in our society, it's marriage. Everyone, the man, the woman, and any children, then know where they stand.
Again, not all relationships are sexual, not all relationships are to do with raising children. In fact, there doesn't need to be children involved at all. I know some people who are married and aren't raising children. I know some people who aren't married and are raising children. And there are constant references in the Bible to people who are married, don't have children, or aren't married and yet have children. So it's not actually something that's even biblical.
And so there are people like in the church who say, therefore, you can only have a marriage between a man and a woman. But there's one way it falls down. It's also pretty well universal that older men and women are allowed to marry, even if the woman is well beyond childbearing age. And they even change the service so that they don't pre-bless the progeny of such a marriage.
A marriage for companionship, you mean?
Basically, the couple are marrying for companionship.
Yeah.
And if they are a man and a woman, they are allowed and even encouraged to marry for companionship.
Right, so how does that inform your thinking about gay marriage in the church?
In other words, the authorities have blown their own premise that marriage is for a man and a woman so that to regularize a relationship. Therefore, why shouldn't it be valid for any adult couple to marry for companionship?
I get the point you're making, Henry.
It's irrelevant whether it's a man-woman,
a man-man, or a
man-man, or woman-woman.
And so do I. It's basically the same as I tend to preach, where it's saying that you can, in theory, become, well, just companions, marriage for companionship, and basically even if it does become sexual, it's between those two. And that's sort of the thing I try to push, because if you cheat in a marriage, you have sex with another person, and risk spreading of STDs between them, you're liable by law. In relationships, you're not. Unless you have Jerry Springer or Jeremy Kyle operating a TV show. That's the court of public opinion, which is a world of difference from the legal system. And furthermore, if you want it to be culpable by law, you need to make it legal. So the marriage isn't just binding in spirit, it's binding by law.
Relationship.
Okay, thanks very much for the call, Henry. Quite a lot of tweets coming in. It's not a matter of the church keeping up with or reflecting the views of the society in which it finds itself, a dangerous road to take, as it would also have to apply to the church reflecting non-liberal, undemocratic societies, but it's a matter of theology, writes this listener. Another one, a great pity that no one on the panel was able to address the nuances of the issue about same-sex marriage. The vast majority of the church believes that the College of Bishops is out of touch.
That one I'd say they have a point, but just because it mentions a undemocratic, unliberal society doesn't mean it's promoting it. For example, you can read or watch Star Wars and you'll see evil being done constantly, but they're not telling you that's right. They're telling you that's one side, whereas the side that your protagonist is on is something completely different. College Bishops out of touch. I think the same can be said for most theologians who study things as they were rather than as they are, and also look for things in the Bible that can support them. Granted, you're then hitting the confirmation bias, but
another, speaking as an
people do that
atheist,
all the
I'm
time in
appalled
any
by the
case, so
idea
there's not
that we
really
have
much
to
you can do
ask
about that.
a 2,000-plus-year-old uncontrolled document to dictate whether or not people are granted equalities. A lot of calls coming in on this as well.
I can sort of see his point there, but unfortunately, as I know someone's going to explain later in the broadcast, the Bible isn't a closed book, it's an open book, despite what some people say. It's very much an open moral book. So you can infer all manner of things from the pages of literature. Just because the standard doctrine is that same-sex marriage is seen as abhorrent by God, doesn't instantly guarantee that it's going to be seen if you look...
Oh, Ken's in Bristol. Hi, Ken.
Hello. Yeah.
Go on, go ahead.
I wanted to make the point that, and I think it's quite interesting, illustrated by the previous caller, really. The previous caller was talking about companionship and celebration of companionship. The world has taken the view that, marriage is about two people expressing the fact they love one another, but that's not really the nature of Christian marriage. It may be the motive. It may be.
This is an interesting one. I'd like to delve into this a bit more, but we'll
The
listen to it
motive, in
first.
most cases, one will hope be the motive, but it's not the nature. The nature of Christian marriage is that there is one humanity across the divide of two sexes, and that's quite normal in Christian theology. We have Trinity, which is one God in three persons. We have the two natures of Christ, which is one person with two natures. We have the church, which is one body with many members. So this theme of unity across divisions is a major theme, the unifying theme of Christianity. And it's a major part of Christian theology. The theme runs right through. And so, therefore...
Thing is, I've done research into this, the unity across divisions. Unfortunately, it may be a theme he can see quite clearly, but it's not something that is openly shown on forums. It's not something that you can simply type into Google and find, or any search engine. So it sounds more like as though he's comparing it to something similar in Greek mythology, where originally humans had two heads, four arms, four legs, so forth. But they were so powerful that the gods split them in half and scattered them across the universe. Scattered across the earth, rather. And as a result, people have to spend years finding their other half. Hence where the term other half comes from. his point is worthwhile making, with the unity of God being the Trinity, Christ being human and godly, and all that sort of thing. But as I often say, why is it gender we look at, or sex that we look at, when we're trying to cross a divide between man and woman? Why can't it be a spiritual thing, or how they operate in the home? That's a world of difference compared to what they're suggesting, which is that man is one thing, woman is another, and that's what God sees. If we're body, soul and spirit, us being free part nature as well, then who's to say that one isn't a different gender from the others? It's a reasonable thing to discuss.
You can't have a marriage where two people, where you haven't got both sexes involved, because that's not actually what it's about.
Right.
Now,
and there's no room to, in your mind, there's no room to adapt that to modern thinking, whether it's within the church or without.
I think not, because it is very fundamentally the nature thing. I completely understand that people who want to express their friendship, their love, their whatever it is, may want some sort of process for doing that. But marriage isn't that. Marriage is, for some churches, marriage is actually regarded as a sacrament. It's a symbolic thing, and it is seen as highly. It speaks highly of the nature of God, the nature of humanity, the nature of creation.
Yeah.
And so it's not really about what individual people might want to say about each other or how they express their. It's really very much about what God and world are fundamentally made of, as it were.
What about the point made by...
If he's including the world in this, it's worthwhile mentioning that there are same-sex animal couples that have been observed. Granted, the success rate of any offspring adopted by those couples is spotty at best, but that is more or less the same as any other couple. And well, just because it's not something we instinctively think of in nature doesn't mean it's not there. There are many aspects of nature we don't understand personally. And even the studies going into those parts that are unusual for us don't fully explain things.
I think it was Dave Dugan on the panel who talked about the fact that if you are in a gay relationship, whether it's two men or two women, and you have a strong Christian faith, you clearly are aware of all of these arguments, yet still you go forward to your local church and say, look, I'd really like to be married in this local church because my faith matters to me a great deal, just as my relationship does. I wonder how you get around that.
Well, that is, of course, exactly what the bishops are doing when they're proposing that, gay couples should be able to come and have prayers for them.
You get a blessing, but you can't be married, they're saying.
Yeah, but because marriage inherently is an expression of a particular relationship between men and women, which is which is in itself a testimony to the way God creates things as diverse but united with a fundamental unity across them.
No, I take your point. I'm very grateful, Ken.
That concept still baffles me, and it's certainly something we'll look into at some point, but as we've expressed, it's far from that. It's far from as straightforward as he's saying. But also, you've got to admit, it's a tightrope they're walking, but if they want to try and strike a balance, that is sort of the way to go. Find a middle ground. Even I, when I was looking into the concept of gay marriage before I saw that Jesus never actually spoke out against it directly. I saw that that was still a possibility. They could still have a blessing, they could still be in a civil partnership, which can be held legal, but not necessarily within marriage. So that's actually a good middle ground.
I want to move it on because lots of people are getting in touch about this. Among them, Francis in York. Francis Brock, good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon to you.
Yeah.
I'm just so interested in the debate, but I think we're in danger of forgetting the good news that Jesus came to bring us, which is that we should love one another as he loves us. Treat other people as we would wish to be treated. I see in Christ that God loves us all, that he came to show us that kind of love, which is serving others. And I believe we are all beloved children of God. And I wouldn't see a division. He made us as we are. Yes, we're not perfect, but we are as we are, and he loves us as we are. And I just wanted to put that out there to say that, this is the Church of England. It's its weakness and its glory that we can hold very different views from each other. And heaven bless poor Archbishop Welby and Cotterell, because they're trying to walk a very difficult path of holding together people who hold completely disparate views.
Well, there's no doubt about that. I mean, just as an illustration of this, I mean, you will have heard the first caller on this.
This is something I've always agreed with. Ideally, we should focus that Christ said to love each other. Granted, that's not his only sermon. He preached many other things, but love was the primary thing. And furthermore, it was something he said we should focus on as his disciples. Love one another as he has loved us, and by this shall his disciples be known. Well, it's not biblical, but when you look into the book of John, you'll see that. Unfortunately, not many people will follow that line.
Subject, and she clearly holds her faith with as much passion as you do, but she takes a very different view of the issue, and she talked about the word abomination with reference to the way homosexuality is regarded, certainly in parts of the Old Testament, and I suggested that she was picking and choosing the bits that suited her to an extent. Yeah. Are you not doing the same thing?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
And I don't actually see a way around that, because the Bible is a vast body of literature of all different types, from myth to poetry to history to genealogy. So, you're going to have the people for whom they wish to see that as being literal in its understanding, and I can't explain how they interpret his contradictions, but to me I see it as inspired by man's increasing understanding of a relationship with God, and therefore it is contradictory, because we change, don't we? We learn, we grow, we alter, and I'm heartened by the fact that we have learned and grown over 2,000 years.
But then you'll be aware of the other argument that says if the church changes every time fashions change in terms of what its fundamental arguments are, then what's the point of it any longer?
The point of it, I don't think, is about dogma or even necessarily about practice. It's about love. That's the point. And it's the loving thing to do.
Unfortunately, saying that we grow and change implies that we burn down all the knowledge that we say is incorrect. And that happens all the time throughout history. But even as we try to reconcile that, we have to remember that certainly I'm saying that God does change. And the fact that he has to change, that covenants have to be reintroduced, adjusting the law gradually so we can follow it better, easier, and more precisely to the way God says. That is still an important aspect to remember when delving into this topic.
Is to say, that bit of dogma doesn't apply in our society now, then, why would you hang on to something that isn't loving?
Francis, I'm grateful. We're going down a very sort of quite deep and thoughtful theological road here, which I wasn't necessarily anticipating. And Emad in Sunderland is going to continue it, I think. Emad, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Your point of view on what the Church of England is saying about gay marriage, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll just correct what you said, because I think some people give you some information which are not complete. You said that, yeah, that's in the Old Testament. No, I just wrote it now while you were talking.
To go down that line is admirable. Unfortunately, we still have to go via the biblical side, and that's why I do my studies. So you can see if, I wouldn't say there's any loopholes in the law, but certainly where the law applies. I always say, well, Jesus already said that we can quite easily put our own aspects onto God. I think I'm very practical, and therefore see that God is very practical, and so therefore the laws are put out there for the people, and yet it comes back and gets updated. Well, probably not updated is the right word, but certainly we can see how it applies then, look at the context of it, and therefore see whether that applies. For example, in this case, quite a few sexual things are banned in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, for that matter. But that doesn't mean that homosexuality must stand out above all of them. No. It must be taken as a general term and see where the common denominator is, and it's nearly always cross-contamination, transmission disease. In those days and age, the medicine wasn't around, the population was small, there had no means of protection, and ultimately it's just putting everyone at risk for no benefit. That's why in Leviticus it says to burn those who, or kill those who perform homosexuality. It's not pleasant, and certainly seems barbaric. But you think that's what they did with the bodies of plague victims, or even cremation as a thing? You can see why it became so important. Burying people away, burning the bodies, ultimately moving things away from society so we don't die of disease.
In the New Testament, it says, "Do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor homosexuals, nor sodomites." And this is 1 Corinthians 6:9, which is in the New Testament.
Okay. Okay, I take that from you. Go ahead. What's the wider point you wanted to make?
I did some research into that particular passage, where it does say that homosexuals will not inherit the kingdom of God. If it was in Corinthians, which you said it was, then going around the Church of Corinth, in Greece at that time was still coming out of the pagan era, when they still had temples to the various pagan gods who were known as homosexuals. Certainly, well, not so much Artemis, but Apollo was. So that's very much saying, don't be like them. Plus, odds are back then they would be saying, that stuff is bad, don't do it. There's Corinth, just as Rome was coming in, they were very much against homosexuality. The term arsenokoitus, whilst it does say, it does translate as unusual sex with men, that still naturally implies anal sex, which can still spread STDs and still does not have any reproductive benefits.
All right. So the point I would think is that the Church of England decided 3 things this week. 1, to apologize to all LGBT for the way the church treated them. The second is they will bless but not, and the third is they will not accept marriage. Mm-hmm. I totally agree with the first. The church treated them, the LGBT, very badly, and this shouldn't be. But this, because the church has to accept everyone, but everyone, not everything. All right. So they should accept homosexuals, but not homosexuality, because it's against the Bible. It doesn't matter what I think, you think, they think. The Bible says quite clearly that homosexual is not part of it. Okay. The community is wonderful to accept this, and they have to enjoy. But in the church, no, because it's so I agree with the first, and I agree with the third, which is they shouldn't do it. But I don't agree with the second.
No. You've made that very clear.
To say that it's not going to be part of the church is something hypocritical, considering quite a lot of things the Bible do say some things come part of the church. But bear in mind that opinions change an awful lot, including who can go into the church or who can be advanced in society. That doesn't mean an awful lot in this context. And furthermore, it is very much implying in those sections that those who are sexually immoral or definitely risking spreading of STDs, of which arsenocoitus is a classic example, we're not going to get much traction in saying that this proves homosexuality is not seen as positive by God.
But I suppose the point it goes back to something we.
Leave the second.
Yeah. No. I get that.
How can they bless something which is sorry to use the word sin, sin, because it's not. It's an old-fashioned word.
Right. So even the blessing that they are prepared to offer in these circumstances, that's a step too far for you, is it?
Not for me. Mm-hmm. It is. If we accept, according to the Bible, that homosexuality is a sin, how can you bless a sin? I'll tell you, can I give an analogy?
Yeah, sure.
Right? It's like someone loves football, like football is his life, and he plays football and loves it. And then one day he decided to come out that he likes to kick the ball with his feet. Well, it is at this level, he likes to kick it with his feet. And so they tell him, no, that's not the rules of football. But I love football, and I can't live without football. This is the way football is played. And then he goes out and cries. They discriminate against me because I'm different. No, it's not because you are different. This is football. You want to play football the way football is played, play it.
Okay.
You want to play it in your way, out of, like, not within the football. But
there's a game called handball that he could play instead in those circumstances. But anyway, yeah, I take your point, Emmett. I'm going to move it on to others who are still.
I didn't quite catch what they were saying about whether it was with the hands or I think I heard the face at one point, in which you can see what are headers. But because of the difference between rules and laws, I'm not going to go into that. The presenter does make a point, though. There is a game called handball. You can go into those sort of things. It is different. Notably different. There are plenty of sports where you can play with your hands. Just because you want to dive headlong into football doesn't mean you have to do it. Just because football isn't entirely inclusive in that doesn't mean that it's irrelevant anymore. No. You can still do things outside the standard in other sports. For example, I think in rugby there was a original rule that you had to kick the ball. You couldn't run with it. And someone broke that rule, and hence the sport of rugby became a thing. So, things do change. That analogy doesn't stand up against history when you look at other sports that have the same problem, namely rugby.
Calling on this subject, lots of tweets as well. Services of blessing are a good compromise for now. Homosexual marriage in the CoE will happen eventually, writes this correspondent. They'll just have an opt-out for those churches which want that. Another, the church stroke Catholicism is outdated and one of the most corrupt institutions on the planet. writes this person, they should love us all as human beings, no matter who we love. Hannah Murphy is in Waterford.
Interesting that we got two drafted different tweets. One saying it's going to happen eventually in the Church of England. The other saying that Catholicism is the most corrupt institute on the planet. Which, to be fair, can be considered as such. However, any institution can be corrupted. Capitalism can be corrupted. Socialism can be corrupted into what we know as communism. And many more things can be corrupted into things that are, in a sense, evil. Things that are meant to be the benefit of people can be turned for the worse. Beating swords into plowshares doesn't always work out, because you can still use a plough to grind someone into the ground if you're not careful. Just because someone's beaten their swords into plowshares doesn't mean they can't be ground into the ground with their own plough.
Go ahead, Paddock. Good afternoon.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm actually near Belfast. I'm in Curryduff. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be able to address you this afternoon, and there's been some fantastic comments there. I welcome the Church of England decision to bless gay marriage. I also welcome the idea that certain people, like the Archbishop, can say, okay, I am not going to do this. Because this is a change. It is not lowering the standard. It is a change of the standard. Now, I'm also concerned about free speech. People are afraid to say what they think, I believe. There is common censorship. And the lobbyists have forced a lot of things upon us, which we don't necessarily agree with. Okay.
I'm not sure that's backed up by the last 15 minutes of radio, by the way, but anyway, go on.
Good point. But no, I think generally speaking, you're not allowed to say this and you're not allowed to say that. And I'm very conscious that I might get some kickback on this. But I don't agree. I don't agree with gay unions being called marriages because, as the previous speaker said, marriage is recognised, man and wife having children.
But not under the laws in England and Wales and Scotland any longer, I would point out.
Yes, but the laws are changed by pressure groups.
Not necessarily. Whilst people do point out the original lines going back to Genesis, saying that this is why man will leave his parents to cling to his wife, that doesn't really apply because the constant application thereafter is always in relation to divorce, not gay marriage. So, just because they were using the reference of man and woman, it's a bit like saying, we mention pets and we'll always mention cats and dogs. There are many more types of pet than just a cat or a dog. And in this case, it's a similar thing. You can still have a union between two men and two women.
Well, in this case, it was voted on by elected politicians, but anyway.
Who toe the line and go with the song of the month.
Okay.
You know, this is what I'm saying about freedom of speech. People are afraid to say what they think, and people sing the same.
But I'm interested in what you were saying a moment ago, because you said you'll back the blessings, so the blessings are okay, but the marriage is not.
Well, that is where I see the difference between giving commitment to another person and living with another person and actually getting married and between man and wife.
Can I read this?
That's the way I feel.
Yeah, no.
Now, one of the things. Let me tell you one thing.
Well, briefly, if you would.
My favorite cousin, my very dear cousin, died because of family rejection. She died by suicide, and she died because of family rejection, and it's been painful. And so we have to leave room for our hearts in a whole lot of other things. And as some of the scholars said, love is the important thing.
Yeah, no, I think that, well, that's a good point perhaps to draw a line under that particular topic.
To mention exceptions, I think a very what's wrong with that pronunciation? Accepting someone for who they are. That is very tricky. And that is something that we need to bear in mind. If we don't accept people for who they are, they're going to suffer. Yes, we can't always accept them for who they are morally because of things like criminal records, like moral disputes, family drama, or heinous crimes they've actually done, such as rape, paedophilia, stealing from the family, all that sort of thing. There are exceptions to that, but ultimately, if we accept people, then we are being truly Christian, as we are very accepting people. Remember, Christ didn't go to the masses in the temple. He went to the people who were rejected. He went for the fishermen. He went for the carpenters. He went for the tax collectors. He went for the people who were being rejected, not the people who were the established. That's an important thing to remember. I've seen posts saying that Jesus didn't overthrow paganism, he overthrew an established religion. At the very least, he rewrote the book on it. To an extent, anyway. At least emphasizing the parts of the law that people were ignoring. We may be accused of being cherry pickers now, but the Israelites...
One last tweet maybe on that subject before I do move on. The church has fewer followers than ever before. It's no one's business who people love. And the warning from this listener is the church will die completely unless it modernizes. So
there's a drastic one. The church will die if it doesn't modernize. But you could say the same's true of most systems, really. You could say agriculture, the traditional way, was going to die a death. But in actual fact, it's very much a thing these days to have single land plots, single person plots to grow food, as it was back in the day. There weren't always vast farms to supply the kingdom. It was more often a few farmers eking out a living for themselves, trading with others. That's what it was. They were primarily providing for themselves and giving to others, not working to provide for others so they can buy food for themselves. That's sort of a flip of the situation.
Well, I wasn't expecting a theological debate for 20 minutes,
but come back quite easily in the event of an apocalypse, or certainly with climate change that it is. To be fair, I wasn't expecting a theological discussion that long. So that'll be it for now. I'll try and get these cobbled together at some point. I'll have to do it with two separate cameras. You may have seen the flip between them, because one camera just couldn't store it all, and to do with the other one. My main computer camera isn't that efficient, and certainly the program just runs dry when trying to do two lots of footage at once. So we'll leave it at that, and hopefully I can get this sent out soon. So for those of you who like this content, please let me know what you think. Comments are always open, so by all means leave your thoughts. I'll be interested to see your take on certain issues. And yeah, I'll see if I can do some more of this. I'll try and get back to at least a semi-regular video schedule at some point. Things have been a bit mad lately. But up until then, you guys have a good evening, and God be with you.